and thanks for joining us today for this webcast. I'm Angela Mascaratolo, Senior Reporter at SC Magazine. Our webcast today is called Security Management 2.0, Time to Replace Your SIEM, sponsored by NitroSecurity. A capable SIEM needs to take vulnerabilities, threats, assets, and flows into account in order to give a credible picture of the enterprise at any moment. Some IT security professionals, however, are finding that their existing SIEM solutions are not meeting their needs. This presentation will guide you through the process of considering a new security managing platform. You'll walk away with practical tips for evaluating whether your current solution is meeting your security and compliance requirements. If you've already made the decision to switch, trust assured you'll also gain an understanding of how to best pick and migrate to a new solution. Today we have two speakers, Adrian Lane, Analyst and CTO at Securosis, and Mel Shakir, CTO of NitroSecurity. Adrian has more than 22 years of industry experience and specializes in database security, data security, and software development. He has formerly worked for Ingress, Oracle, and Unisys, as well as a CIO in the financial vertical. Our other speaker, Mel Shakir, has more than 15 years of experience in software development and management, information security, and database technologies. In 2004, Mel founded an application and database security company called Incash, which was subsequently acquired. He also formerly managed a database practice at Goldman Sachs. Just to let everyone know, in attendance today, there will be a question and answer session after our speakers have given their presentation. So we do encourage you to send in any questions you may have via the interface. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Adrian.
Thanks, Angela. If you could advance the slides, just kind of give a welcome to our audience today and kind of give you an overview of what we're going to cover. And really we want to talk about some of the platform evolutions that we're seeing from the analyst side that are making some of these changes possible as well as probable. We'll go over the evolving requirements that customers are facing. I mean, you might have bought your SIEM 3, 4, 5 years ago, invested a lot of time and money into it, but your requirements have simply changed over time. So we're going to give you a process of evaluation for evaluating your current platform as well as any potentially new platforms on how to go about comparing apples to apples, go through a decision process to help you to make a decision of whether or not it's the right thing to move from your existing entrenched SIEM provider or not. And then we'll go through some of the negotiation processes, migration processes that help you roll that out. So next slide, please. So why now? At Securosis, we are talking to a Fortune 1000 customer every single week, it seems like, for the last 18 months. And we're just really shocked at the amount of unhappiness that we're hearing. It's almost universally the case that the platform is not scaling, that they are having to dedicate full-time employees to managing the interface. They are unable to get some of the compliance reports that are deemed critical. They can't do some of the real-time forensics they would like to. Real-time analysis, or the forensics are taking quite a long time to be able to produce the reports and actually dig into some of the information. So it was basically the talking with so many of the enterprise customers that we realized that this is probably a good time to take a look at this topic, drill down into what's possible with some of the newer platforms, and see if it makes sense for you to move on. We certainly know on the vendor side that many of the original platforms have been sold. The new acquiring companies are not all that interested in making significant investments into that SIEM platform, and they're kind of cashed out. They're milking the cash cow. They know you might be unhappy. They're going to give you a couple gratis features to keep you complacent, but by and large, some of the architectural enhancements that are necessary to keep up with the demand for IT services really hasn't followed the customer needs. So next slide, please. What I really want to talk about is platform evolution. And these are some of the things that you're not likely to see in any given vendor advertisements. There are the infrastructural changes and analysis changes that go on behind the scenes that make other things possible. So I really want to go into some of those underlying features and make sure you're aware of them, so if you do engage another vendor, or even your existing vendor, you can understand what's going on underneath the covers to help you analyze whether or not a platform can actually scale or not. So let's move to the next slide. So architectural advancements that we are seeing. There is innovation in SIEM. It may not seem like it, but there really is. One of the most important things that we are seeing is the underlying architectures are changing. The deployment models are changing from your basic architectures, such as most companies use a hybrid of a hierarchical deployment. What we're starting to see is some of the star, some of the mesh, and other types of hybrids that actually push a lot of the functionality out to the nodes. So they're not just collecting events and processing and parsing events, but they're actually doing a lot of the legwork. This gives you a natural kind of divide and conquer model for processing events. We're also seeing that the internal structures are a little bit more efficient. They're able to collect information faster. They're able to facilitate endpoint analysis, meaning they can actually do analysis on the raw data stream as they come in. And that is important simply because that gives us the ability to have real-time analytics. So the architectural changes are really what allow for a lot of these other aspects for usability enhancements. Next slide, please. And so this we find to be key. Really, SIEM is there to make your job easier. It's there to be a tool that allows you to get reports, to identify security events, and so forth, and it needs to be usable. It needs to do the grunt work and the legwork for you without having to have a lot of hand-holding and a lot of time invested into culling through events, looking at false positives, and so forth. So what are the ways that we really do that? Well, one of the ways is we get better data. So if we can take events and we can correlate those events and do some enrichment with other sources, we're much better able to write policies that give us fine-tuned responses to the events that are going on. Reporting and visualization technologies that help us identify very quickly what we need to be concerned with, see how the infrastructure is doing, and then real centralized management. And I'm not talking about, a web portal and some duct tape on top of it's kind of a virtual front end. I mean real integration with all of the nodes and all of the features and functions of the product. And this is important that if you're using a mesh-type deployment model where you're doing endpoint analysis for real-time analytics, you need to be able to push policies, you need to be able to push rules out to the nodes and the endpoints and actually have those endpoints respond. Because otherwise you're never going to be able to divide and conquer up to the environment well enough to get the real-time analytics and responses that you need. Next slide, please. And once again, information analysis. It's not just about network events. We really want to be able to have some sort of a business process awareness, and that really happens at the application layer. So a lot of the advanced features and functions that we see on SIEM nowadays have to do with monitoring, so file activity monitoring, database activity monitoring, user monitoring. We've been seeing for years that SIEM platforms do deep packet inspection, and it's really become a throwaway term because everybody says they have it, but very few of them really do it well. And we're really not at that point any longer. We really need to be able to move up the stack and make sense of the application events as they're happening, do some content analysis, do some real-time analysis, and be able to take that information back into our reports. This really is one of the areas that will help cut work down because you're actually able to take just a generic network event and make sense of it in the business context. Next slide, please. So part of the response that we've been seeing from the vendor community is to add a lot of FUD into the air and advertise a lot of new features that really don't actually help a lot of the customers. Really, when it comes down to it, what we feel from our research that is really disrupting the market is the architectural changes and some of the analysis capabilities that are being introduced. A lot of these features that are kind of bolt-on really don't help you. They're just simply a marketing gimmick for the vendor to be able to say, hey, look, we've got new stuff, when they really haven't gone back in and done the really hard, painful work of changing the core infrastructure, how data is stored, how it's processed, how it's analyzed, and how the product's deployed. That's really freaking hard work to do. It takes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of engineering hours to get it to work, and then hundreds of testing hours to make sure it's going to work in the field. And so, a lot of the vendors are going to patch and cover up. So you really got to go in during your analysis process and look to see what's been changed by the vendor. So now let's kind of switch gears. Next slide, please, and talk about some of the evolving requirements. So when we have these discussions and we hear about unhappy customers, a lot of the time they're right, because granted, their requirements have evolved over time. There are new compliance regulations. They now actually understand what some of the security threats are and realize there's a deficiency within the SIEM platform they have. Sometimes the requirements simply grew because the auditors wanted additional reports that they weren't previously generating, and now it's a matter of failing an audit or not failing an audit. Your organization grew. You bought another division. You have another 50 servers. Your event logs are tripling in size. The threats have changed. We've seen a lot of new threats over the last few years and different ways to circumvent additional or existing security technologies, and we need to be able to see those patterns or do some detection on them based upon user monitoring, behavioral monitoring, what have you. So next slide, please. So really what we want to be able to do when looking at whether or not a SIEM meets our requirements is to go back, start with a blank slate, and list what those requirements are. And this is a really important part of the process, to be able to document this, moving forward to be able to rationalize whether or not your existing SIEM is capable of meeting the demands or not. You need to understand what your scalability requirements are. If you're grousing about it, well, what is it really that you need? How are you coming up short? What do you foresee to be the future requirements? What are the compliance goals of the organization? What has to be met? What reports have to be met? What's really needed for event response? I mean, is it same-day response, or is it same-hour response, or do you really need real-time alerting? How can you react faster? How can you react better? SIEM management is likely not your job. The SIEM is there to provide a tool to filter, to screen, and to do a lot of the grunt work necessary for you so you can quickly and efficiently get the other things that you need done. So revisiting your requirements is pretty much essential to your platform evaluation. Next slide, please. Because you really can't evaluate a new SIEM or existing SIEM if you don't understand where it's falling short or where it's actually meeting your requirements. Because that would be part of any new SIEM platform that you're going to put in place, is it has to be able to do the basic stuff that's working now, as well as any new and evolving requirements. Next slide, please. So one of the things we really recommend is to take a strong look at what you need from your SIEM and what does it do well. What's it doing poorly? What data is missing? Document all of these out. Work with the other people who have a stake in the SIEM output. Your compliance organization, your internal audit organization, security teams, IT operations, all depend to some degree or another on what's going on with the SIEM system. So you want to be able to take a look in relation to your requirements and see where it's falling short or where it's actually meeting the requirements. Then prioritize these based upon what's critical to the organization, what's just basically nice to have. And next slide, please. Really what you want to do is document that out into some sort of graphical representation so you can actually see where the deficiencies are. This will really help in prioritizing, identifying areas that need to be fixed, building a complete story about what you need to do. Your goal here really is to have a clear understanding of what's falling short, and that way you can apply this then to other vendors. And so at this point in time, we're going to move into looking at other vendors. This is it's natural to have a bias against your incumbent because this is the product that you've been living with. It's one you're uncomfortable with in many cases, and it's failing to generate the reports you need. Build up a complete story. understand what your basic functions are, and from an IT operations standpoint, understand what the IT operations organization, next slide please, has to do to be able to manage and keep this thing running properly. I think today what we see is these common deployment models, a flat deployment model or hierarchical deployment model. Next slide please. Each of which is going to have maintenance to the agents, maintenance to the log collectors, maintenance to the SIEM itself. The newer models are going to be a little bit different, and how they get managed, how they get deployed, who owns and operates is all part of the analysis process. So chart out your priorities. Consider scale, because this is one of the biggest problems that we hear from vendors. From the customers in the field, that they're not scaling, and they need to not only encompass additional servers, but they're going to have to take additional data types too. These type of models really help. So next slide, please. So now that you've kind of stacked up the requirements and you know where the existing one is succeeding or failing, let's move into the vendor evaluation. Now, next slide. There are probably 20 different SIEM vendors out there and another handful of log management vendors. So this is where you're going to take your core requirements and you're going to map them out into an RFP and RFI. And I know that there's on the internet you can go out and find generic RFP and RFIs, and they ask 10,000 questions. That's not really going to do you any good here. You want to be able to construct your own, just to create your own short list of the evaluation, but really stick to the basics. Have the vendors answer completely through an RFI that is focused on your critical and high priority items. Once again, this is a reason why revisiting requirements and looking at the shortfalls of the existing platform are really important. As a process, you're going to need to document everything, because when it comes down to the later steps that we're going to go over, I think you'll see just how important this is. So based upon the answers from the RFP or the RFI, create your short list and evaluate or select them based upon the weighted requirements, what's critical. Next slide, please. You're probably only going to want to select 2, maybe 3, depending on the size of your company and the requirements that you have, new vendors to come in and conduct a proof of concept. This is really where the real legwork starts, and this is kind of a painful process. Fortunately, the good news is that the vendors will usually help you. The bad news is that you don't want to let the vendor run the proof of concept, because they've orchestrated this as best they can. Your goal is to not evaluate how well the vendor can do a POC. You're there to evaluate how well the vendor can meet your requirements. So you're going to need to come up with some real incident data and some real test cases to drive the decision process. Next slide, please. What you really want to be able to do is simulate some attack data and actually see if you can detect the attack. See if you can actually get the forensic data you need to do the analysis on the simulated attack. Once you've gone through this process with several vendors, it starts to become pretty clear who's easy to use, who's easy to implement policies for, who's going to meet your basic requirements. But once again, make sure that you're the one running the tests, you're the one driving the process, not the vendor. They can help you do the setup work, help you write the policies, but when it comes down to it, it's your data, your test plan. Next slide, please. So here's where things get fun, too. Introspection time. So really, when it comes down to it, how well did your existing platform do? Are you doing this process because you're pissed off at them, or are there really some serious deficiencies? And how well did the other products stack up? So the original goals that you might have had may not be met, but can your existing provider give you enhancements that will actually meet your demands? How much of this effort is really because you're pissed off? How much of this is because you really do have deficiencies? And you need to be honest about that. Your biases will stick out as you try to sell a SIEM replacement to management. It becomes abundantly clear that if you have certain biases that are not realistic, they're going to stick out. They're going to sniff that out, because believe me, the CTO does not want to, or sorry, the CFO will not want to spend additional money, and a lot of the IT staff is not going to want to go through the work to replace an existing working product. You're going to have to be very compelling into your decision process as to why you need to do this replacement. So, did you specify the goals clearly? Have you specified the inadequacies properly? Is there really budget? Be realistic. Can you train a new staff? Can you actually implement the new SIEM, or is this going to require, professional services? And this is one of the things that we get from a lot from some of the, the Fortune 1000 companies now, is that they don't want to be in the business of SIEM any longer. They are going to outsource providers and third-party service providers and let them take the requirements and build them into policies and then be responsible for the infrastructure. This actually can be a reasonably cost-effective way to go about it, but you've got to have a thorough set of requirements and thoroughly documented set of policies to be able to get cost containment within that sort of relationship. So, next slide, please. I think we've gone over a lot of this already. The supporting documentation about the requirements, the deficiencies, illustrate the competition and how it stacks up with the incumbent. Do some cost estimates, pro or con. You may actually find that you don't want to move forward with this, but it would be a good exercise just to understand the cost of staying put versus the cost of moving forward. And then construct your recommendations. What I've done in the past personally is that I've taken a number of my staff members and given them the presentation that I'm going to give to the executive team. Take the documentation in a slide presentation format, deliver it, and see what questions they ask and if they can punch holes into the story. And that really helps you remove some of the bias to get your argument straight, to make sure you've done your cost analysis properly before you start going and talking to your boss's boss. Next slide, please. So once again, very important to document all of these things and to get your executive management team to buy in. Because they're going to be the ones cutting the check, and they're going to be the ones who are reviewing you for how well you do for deploying this product. So let's say that you have now made your decision, pro or con, to move forward or not. Can we move forward to slide 23, please, negotiation? Challenger or incumbent. So regardless of what your decision is, tell the incumbent they lost, even if they didn't. This is kind of negotiation 101, and it's not really particularly ethical, but most likely your vendor already knows that they're in trouble with you. They already know your dissatisfaction. It's gone through their channels, their product managers, their SEs, and so forth. They know. So at the very least, you're going to push pro or con for pricing reductions and see what they can do as far as features, functions, and upgrades, and so forth. Next slide, please. But first, I want to talk about the replacement tactics. Let's say that you have made the decision that one of the vendors offers suitable scalability, offers the ease of use, and offers some of the performance that you need. So what process do you want to go through? This is where you're going to start negotiation. The classic model is to wait till the end of the quarter. Most of the SIEM vendors in this space are from smaller, independent vendors. Price pressures work. They don't always work, but they usually work. If that doesn't work, you can always also try to get other types of discounts on professional services, extra boxes, maybe help with some of the deployments, better support and service levels. These are the type of things that can help, ease your transition, ease implementing new policies, and ease the maintenance of the product, and get you a reasonably competitive cost so your CFO is happy. But also remember, when you're going through this process, your boss's boss may have been the person who selected the last one. They may have signed off on it. They may even know people from the vendor. So your replacement tactics and your operations of deployment are going to have to be very, very, very carefully orchestrated because you will be under the gun for this. These are not trivial investments. We're talking millions of dollars in most cases of time and product and support costs. Next slide, please. But even if you decide to keep the existing products, you've already told the vendor that they've lost out on the POC. Now is when you start negotiating. Get more services. Find out what they can do as far as product enhancements to Can they give you more licenses so you can deploy virtual appliances, maybe to come up with some of the performance shortfalls, maybe have their SEs or professional people to come in and do some of the work, write some of the policies, or get you some of the reports that you need. You'd be surprised sometimes what the vendors will come up with a little bit of communication and a little bit of financial pressure. So whatever way you made your choice, recommend that these tactics for negotiation, they've proven very effective for me. Next slide, please. So talking about migration, I've seen this done right, and it takes a lot of work. Next slide, please. Migration really is going to require that you're running systems in parallel. There's no way that you are going to simply install a bunch of agents, install a bunch of appliances, virtual or otherwise, and then flip the switch one night and have this thing all work. It just doesn't happen. You're going to need a plan. You're going to need to prepare. You're going to need to orchestrate, and then you're going to need to actually do the work. So in the planning phase, you need to understand where all of these systems are, who's going to be doing the work of installing them, and in what order. A lot of times what I recommend is you look at the structural deployment model that you use for SIEM and combat the challenge of replacement that way. So if you are doing, a star or a mesh-based type of deployment, you can actually go from node to node to node. Get one node installed, make sure it runs properly, get it 100% complete, and move on. You replicate that functionality across the entire organization. In some cases, if you're still using a hierarchical or some of these other types of deployment models, start with a centralized server, make sure it's up and running, make sure that the users are installed, the basic features are there, and then start feeding data into it. You're going to be running both platforms side by side for a while. You're just going to have to plan on that. And I also recommend orchestration, so maybe even doing a couple test runs with one of your locations or in a data center, or maybe even open up a private cloud, install some stuff, and see how the migration works virtually. That's a possibility. And so this is kind of tough to get right. This can take a couple of months. It may take 6 months. But you've got to make sure that you're still delivering security and that you're still delivering compliance reports during the portion of migration. Once you feel that you're comfortable with that you've gotten the full SIEM capabilities up and running, send sample reports to management, send sample reports to the other stakeholders, and make sure that you're generating the alerts and have them sign off. You want to share the wealth here. You want to make sure that everybody's in agreement that this stuff's up, it's running, and it's working appropriately. So that's my recommendations as far as migration planning. There's no one right answer to do it. There's lots of different ways to tackle the problem. There's just a couple of things that you're going to have to recognize over and over, no matter what you do, is that documentation, clearly understanding the process, clearly understanding the priorities, so that you tackle these in the order of most importance. Last slide, please. Yeah, so in summary, if you look back through this slide deck, I think we're making this available to you after the presentation, you will see that each step builds upon itself. And then each step helps validate the previous step. And it really is helpful to go through this as an entire exercise, to be able to link in the requirements to the deficiencies, to the evaluation process, to the justification process, and then finally understanding enough about the infrastructure to be able to do an effective migration and not miss big chunks of functionality or dependencies that you might have. So that is it for our presentation. This is Security Management 2.0, and hope you enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks, Adrian, so much. It was a very interesting presentation. And now I'd like to turn it over to our second speaker, Mel Shakir, who is CTO of NitroSecurity.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon to all of you. Many of you already have heard about us, so I will be extremely brief on my introduction of NitroSecurity. We are a leading SIEM vendor, and what makes us different is the speed and scale of our solution and integration of key security technologies into one powerful solution we refer to as the content-aware SIEM. We are based out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We have a pretty significant customer footprint, both in commercial enterprise and government. Those of you who have been following us would know we have gone from being a new entrant in the SIEM space to becoming a leader in the Gartner SIEM quadrant in 4 short years. During this time, we have got numerous awards in technology from technology evaluators and analysts. Here is a very small sampling of our customers, which includes everything from Fortune 500 to small and mid-sized enterprises in all the key verticals. So let's move on to the real part. Now today, Adrian said it as loudly and clearly as one possibly can, albeit nicely, being the gentleman he is, that early SIEM vendors have traditionally overpromised and underdelivered. While SIEMs have evolved in their functionality and many support event collection from hundreds of data sources and provide lots of features, many SIEMs have still not effectively addressed the key platform challenges that make a tool in a real production environment either useful or shelfware. Now, to reiterate some of the points that Adrian made so strongly today, number one being scalability. Right? It may sound like an old school phrase, but it is even more important today than ever before. We are inundated with huge amounts of security data. Even in a mid-sized company today, generates at least a few thousand events per second. A handful of firewalls, IPSs, IDSs, domain controllers, mail, web, database servers, endpoint security devices, all it takes. An event count, of 1,000 events per second can generate billions of records in a year and around 1 terabyte of compressed data in a single year. And for a large company, they can do that in a day. Also in the era of zero-day exploits, malware totaling tens of thousands a day, botnets, APTs, and client-side attacks, we cannot be selective in the evidence we keep. That means we have to keep a lot more data that add contextual meaning to the logs, and even content like documents or chat sessions that would be key in your fact-finding. Okay? So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the features in NitroView that address some of the concerns that Adrian raised in SIEM tools. Okay? Now going back to a little bit to scalability and performance. When Adrian said real-time analysis, he did not mean real-time event collection. He meant what he really said, real-time analysis. Many SIEMs have become an after-the-fact reporting tool because they cannot deal with the fast data collection, analysis, and reporting all at the same time. And the key culprit here, again, is the underlying platform on which the SIEM application was developed. And why is real-time key? For fast incident response, of course. Every year, Verizon cites in their data breach report that the evidence of a data breach was there all along, but it was discovered months later. This is because the analysts cannot do their job if the tools take 30 minutes to answer every what-else scenario. At NitroView, we built the industry's fastest SIEM on a platform that was developed for and tested by the Department of Energy for nuclear power reactors, a scenario analogous to security where thousands of probes collect data which need to be analyzed in real time. So we started off with a very, very strong foundation in data management. In NitroView, data is collected and can be analyzed in near real time against weeks and months of historical data at speeds that allow a security analyst to quickly access the data and analyze the data. So again, I want to reemphasize the fact that when we talk about scalability and performance, it's not just the event collection architecture and the deployment architecture that makes it possible, but it's also the speed of reporting the events back in that intelligent fashion. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the architectural developments that are going on in NitroView and what we offer today as part of our 8.5 release. Adrian talked about mesh architectures and hierarchical deployments, and picking the right architecture for your deployment is also a key. In a small environment, you may have a SIEM and you may have a number of collection devices reporting up to the SIEM. In our case, we have added virtual devices for collection as well. So if you are in a scenario where you have 1,000 locations, but very few servers at those locations, then you can use, you could use agents or you could use virtual collectors. You could, if you are in an organization which requires 100% uptime or near 100% uptime, and you have a dedicated SOC team that is using this in real time all the time, then you probably need a full HA environment, a high availability environment with good failover. Now, in our deployment scenarios, we offer HA and failover capabilities at every single level. You can have a primary and a secondary SIEM. When one fails over, the other takes over. The configurations are automatically managed. You can have full redundant collection as well with complete IPMI support, which means that multiple devices appear as a single device, and when a device fails, the other device automatically takes over. All of those scenarios are available. You can have multiple SIEMs deployed, and then you can have a manager of manager reporting, with all these SIEMs reporting up to a central SIEM and forwarding only critical events. You can deploy it in pretty much any scenario that you can think about. So the deployment, the flexible architecture that we provide today will meet your scenario, whether you're a small, mid, or a very, very large enterprise. Now, let's look at some of the deployment options and what is part of the solution mix that we provide. One of the key differentiators. So this is the NitroView SIEM, and as part of the SIEM, we have two primary features. Okay, most of you who have dealt with SIEMs are already aware of this. Some people call them receivers, others call them collectors, but that is to bring in the third-party logs that you already have, the logs that you're already generating in your environment. To bring those into the SIEM, you need the receivers or the collectors. Now, we have done one thing differently. Being a new generation SIEM, having come into the market only 4.5 years ago, having seen the traditional problems with the first generation SIEMs, we developed the compliant log management, which is a long-term log management feature, as a feature of the SIEM rather than having a separate, collection solution. Okay? So this is a feature within the SIEM itself. And depending on your size of your organization, you could have all of it, as depicted in the earlier diagram, in a single appliance, or you can deploy it in a number of different scenarios where you have each of these functionalities on a separate piece of hardware. Okay? And you can have multiple collectors and multiple AMs to be able to scale out as much as you need. You can also take full advantage of your SAN infrastructure or CIFS or NFS, whatever you have in your environment. And if you have requirements of a massive online data store, which many or most of our customers have today, you can use direct attached storage, which can be 50 terabytes or 100 terabytes. Now, what we're talking about here in this scenario is your ability to be able to have up to, in NitroView, up to 500 billion events online. Now, this has been unprecedented in the SIEM industry. And like I said before, even for a mid-sized company, you can start hitting billions of events pretty quickly. Okay, so and having that online storage to be able to do analytics, to be able to compare what is happening now versus the trends, what happened a few weeks ago or a few months ago, or maybe even during the course of the year, that is extremely important. So having the platform to be able to do that kind of analysis is extremely important. You can't just look at 24 hours of data and have summarized all the previous data into very large buckets where they essentially lose their granularity. Now, one of the things we did different, as we got into the SIEM space was to provide a lot more value. Some of the issues that we were seeing, and even Adrian pointed out, is we need, the SOC team needs not just a SIEM, but it needs a bunch of other technologies, and some of them are key technologies that need to work very, very closely in a tightly integrated fashion. So we were the first SIEM vendor who actually brought in database activity monitoring as part of the SIEM solution. With the DBM being a specialized collector, forwarding events to the ESM. The other key part of our solution is application data monitoring. it is not just about monitoring what's in the logs, but we utilize deep packet inspection technology. And again, this word has been abused quite a bit, as Adrian pointed out. We have really done this the right way. It gives you the ability to, discover applications in your environment, discover documents. It is also a form of DLP Lite, literally. So it lets you do matching on documents and other use cases. And this is part of the SIEM itself. When we got into the security space, which was many years ago, before we became a SIEM vendor, we were actually an IPS vendor. And our IPS is tightly integrated into the SIEM. One of the reasons we became a SIEM was when people started looking at our user interface and the ability to very quickly analyze the firewall data, is when a lot of the people recommended that why can't you collect even more data. This was really our us getting into the SIEM space about 4.5 years ago. So all of these solutions work very, very tightly together. And this tightness of integration is extremely important because now we are able to leverage the IPS for remediation, not just as a traditional IPS. Actually, the SIEM can generate events that you can have a correlation rule, send a blacklist event back to the IPS. So now you can take events from pretty much any log source and utilize your IPS to do more than what it was meant to do. Here's another quick slide which just gives you an idea of how the different appliances are deployed in your environment. They're all a single solution, but they're deployed at different points in your network because different points in the network traditionally produce different kind of data. So for example, the database is being monitored by the DBM, which is traditionally deep inside the enterprise, and then you have ADM, which can monitor application sessions. It can monitor either internet traffic or internet protocols, or it can monitor internal protocols like who's using SSH or who's using FTP internally and do analytics on that as well. SMB protocol, who's trying to do file transfers, for example. And then you have the IPS at the edge and the receivers collecting your log data, and all of this feeding into a single console. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we are doing in terms of advanced threat detection, because developing the platform, as Adrian said, is key. But at the end of the day, tool is supposed to be intelligent, and it's supposed to be able to provide you guidance on when things are anomalous. Okay. Now, one of the key facts over here, is the logs that you get from your environment by themselves could be a little bit boring. And the first step usually is data enrichment. So the SIEM vendors, when they started with the data enrichment, they started off by, either looking for geolocation data. So for example, when an IP address is seen, what is the actual location of the data? And that's really important. When they see a username, they'll say, they will try to look up what is the role of the user. But we have really taken it to the next level. We've actually tried to create an entire platform for data enrichment so that you can actually mimic your business processes. So let me give you a few examples. Let's say, you're in your human resources department. Every year you have an employee evaluation. I really like to give this example because the employee evaluation at the end of the day gives a list of employees who have done really well or have not done well. And that is really your business risk. This is coming from one of your internal processes. Why can't that information of who the high-risk employees are be fed into the SIEM? Right? There are many cases like that. If I pick a case in healthcare, let's say some of you might be in healthcare, the bed number or the patient's disease code is very important. It may not be in any log file, but if you have the username, you should be able to go look up the disease code if you are a hospital, and you should be able to utilize that field for additional intelligence. So one of the things we have done is we not only tag these events, we are actually creating custom fields and adding them to the logs, adding all this new information to the logs. So you have your raw logs, but then you have these normalized logs with additional fields that are included in them that you can now utilize for correlation, and you can do better scoring. Okay. The other part in the event collection is the user normalization. Every one of us, when we work for a company, we have several identities. It's J. Smith may go by John Smith or J. Smith, or he has an email. He has his own personal email, a red mail that he uses, or he has a chat ID. He may have physical card access, all kinds of different identities. His phone number, for example. When we collect the logs from their sources, we only have resource identifiers, and it's sometimes hard to tie back to the actual person. So some of the features in the product that are coming out allow you to do that level, allow you to get that level of granularity, so that you can actually get to the point of understanding, what this event actually means, and be able to take even more smarter decisions. The other things that are happening at NitroView is, trying to bring in better feeds, which provide more factual information to us. So, for example, knowing what patch level an asset is on, it may be important, but also knowing that it is metasploitable. That any script kiddie can literally run a metasploit exploit against your system and take over is also very important. Now, when you have that kind of information in the system, you can do better risk scoring. And that's one of the things we're trying to do. We are doing a lot with user tracking, for example. Right? Traditionally, people have tried to track users, based on some information coming out of Active Directory or some information coming out of identity and access management solutions. But we have really gone to the next level, and we do things which are you may not have heard of. Like, for example, following Kerberos tickets to be able to track a user's identity, or look into network packets, for example, to be able to see if an employee ID over there is a better identifier of who the person is, rather than using his service account that is showing up in the event log. All kinds of things are possible to add intelligence, and that's where we are at right now. Once you have this accurate information, then you have to do correlation. That's what SIEM vendors do. And what we have heard from our customers is that keeping up with rule-based correlation has been extremely hard. This is one of the things that the SIEMs promised and did not deliver, or rather they delivered a platform without, and that platform essentially puts the burden back on the user community, wherein they have to create more and more and more rules to be able to think of every possible scenario. So we came up with a risk-based approach, which is now being used by some really large companies very, very effectively. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about log enrichment and user tracking, but I also want to tell you that about the network intelligence that we have added to the SIEM through deep packet inspection. Now, why was this very important? Because there is some information that is simply not in the log files. And the information that is not in, and I'll give you lots of examples. So, for example, if you have a system that has been affected by malware, and just for an instant of time behaves like a web server, right? Which log has that information in it? When somebody does an instant message session, or there's a P2P file transfer, where is that log file? It's not there anywhere. When somebody selects 1,000 database records which have sensitive information in it, does your log file say that somebody selected 1,000 sensitive data records? Well, all that information is not there in log files, and you can really utilize network-based deep packet inspection to complement your logs. So we do things like, the application discovery, the protocol analysis, where we are able to tap into protocols like DNS and P2P and IRC. We are able to really add a tremendous amount of value. For example, authentication over SMB protocol and file transfer that are occurring. We can see all of that stuff over the network. And it also addressed a lot of data leak monitoring cases. So a lot of customers came back to us and said that we were unable to deploy a full-fledged DLP solution, or the budget doesn't permit, or implementing it is very hard. But there are lots of use cases in terms of network visibility that we would like to achieve, and that should be part of the SIEM. So we gave them just that. I'm going to rush through the last couple of slides to leave a few minutes for question and answers. So some of the so that was really regarding adding contextual information to your logs from all the different sources, because the logs themselves may not have all the information. But then there's the other part that Adrian was talking about also, which is content, right? And this again puts a tremendous volume or tremendous burden, because it adds a lot of volume to your data collection. Now you are talking about capturing certain kinds of responses to your queries. You're talking about capturing documents because they may have sensitive information in them. Somebody, for example, is sending a confidential document outside the organization, it's just a bad business process because he sent that document with the word confidential in it, but the document itself is not encrypted. Why would you send something in this day and age, which is really confidential, that is not encrypted, right? So the ability to be able to capture these things and have the evidence is important. We look for emails and we look for attachments inside emails. We look at social media websites, which play a very big role now in the kinds of threats we face today. IM chats and voice over IP, and the ability to actually replay those sessions. This is what really adds power to the SIEM when you start investigating an incident. Okay, I'll mention risk-based correlation very, very briefly. But risk-based correlation, again, is really the other approach that all the other SIEM vendors have taken, the rule-based approach, and this is the rule-less approach, where again, you're able to mimic the business risk. Now, instead of having a if-then-else rule, you can say, hey, these assets are important, and traditionally these are the business users who should be accessing these assets, and just monitor, just observe the event activity over time, and if the event activity is abnormal, I would like to know about it. And when you create these risk-based buckets, we refer to them as risk-based buckets, it can be on any metric that is available. So you could say that, at this business location, we don't use port numbers, or certain port numbers should not be used. You can use that in your risk-based buckets that you're creating. So some very high-level stuff that you can put in and let the system do anomaly detection based on some of the tidbits of information you have provided. Now, again, this comes in, this risk-based approach includes all the additional, custom fields that we have added as part of enrichment. So if you're mimicking through your risk-based correlation your business process where the HR department sends you that critical data about suspect employees or high-risk employees, you can utilize that information in your risk-based approach to monitor their activity on different systems, and if it's different from what it normally is. Okay. Just one quick thing, one mention of UCF. We realize that this, there are two stakeholders in the SIEM. A lot of this, SIEM purchases do come from compliance teams. A lot of them come from security teams. So we have to make sure that the tool, benefits both these major stakeholders. One of the things we have done is we have introduced something called the Unified Compliance Taxonomy into our product. And what that allows us to do is very different from what others have done before, where they've written reports, static reports, to deal with certain kinds of compliance controls. Now, the compliance landscape is, evolving very, very fast. And to keep up pace with that, one of the innovative things we did was we took, we worked with a vendor who provides this unified compliance taxonomy to us, which in turn maps to different kinds of controls and regulations all over the globe. And we were able to map their compliance taxonomy with the SIEM taxonomy, right? So what that essentially does is it allows us to basically map, basically pivot on a security event in two different ways. One is a view that is, based on the kinds of things that the security team looks for, whether it's a recon or DOS or authentication, and the other, purely what the auditor looks for in terms of violation of certain kinds of key controls. And then all of this stuff has to come together, all the integrated technologies, into one solution, which is a single pane of glass, which sometimes is a problem with many other SIEMs as well, where one interface provides you the ability to not only, monitor all the events in a single place, but also manage your entire solution in terms of policies and appliances and everything from a single, truly unified interface. So this is what we are up to at NitroSecurity. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. We have about 5 or 10 minutes left.
Thanks, Mel. Since we do have just a few minutes left, let's just jump right in. And we have received some questions from the audience, but just a reminder, if you do have any additional questions, please do type them into the interface now. So one of our listeners today would like to know, how do you associate behavior of a user/system in a DHCP environment?
Is that for me, or do you want to take it, Adrian?
Either of you is fine.
Okay, I can take a stab at that.
Okay.
So there are a number of ways to do that. One of the ways is to be able to monitor, the traffic itself. I gave you a very good clue about Kerberos, right? Now, if you look at the Kerberos packets, you will not only see, when you look at the authentication events, you will see the IP address and you will see the usernames. And of course, those IP addresses do expire, but you have the IP address and the username. And then when there's a new user on that IP address, you have that information as well. So if you track it the right way, you have the critical piece of information that you are really looking for.
Okay, great. Another one for you, Mel. As new documents are created, how does the SIEM recognize how high risk the document is?
Well, in terms of how high risk the document is, there are a couple of things you can do. Well, the SIEM allows something called a dictionary, and as part of the dictionary, you can either have a process in place to put in, checksums off those sensitive documents, especially if they're going to be static. So if you have a process in place, you can monitor it that way. The other way is to look really for content inside the document, looking for keywords and phrases and things of that nature to be able to monitor it. So these are two possible approaches to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Another one for you, Mel. Somebody would like to get a little bit more information about risk scoring that you referred to in your presentation. They ask, how does risk scoring work? What standards does it follow?
Okay. So when you say what standard it follows, I'm not exactly sure about that part of it, but I'll tell you how the risk scoring really works in our tool. So traditionally, SIEM tools have relied on a signature-based approach or risk associated with an asset. So these have been primarily the two ways that and when I say signature-based, it also includes, a certain risk level that was pointed out or assumed based on inference of VA data, vulnerability data that came in for that specific asset. But it was very asset-centric and very signature-centric. Now, what we have done is we have opened up the platform to use any possible metric. So when I said that an HR evaluation report, specifies the list of employees that are suspect or have not done well, and therefore meet a certain level of risk, you can incorporate that into your risk-based calculation. All the risk is calculated from 0 to 100, and you can basically specify thresholds for what is informational, warning, critical, 3 or 4 thresholds that you can provide. Now, on top of that, we provide some visualization as well with our new risk-based technology, wherein essentially you can get a thermometer of or the temperature of what it looks like in relation to what it normally is. Again, the risk tuning, may happen over a period of time. So, for example, if you see, the numbers that you may have started off with, right? So, again, going back to the same example of HR evaluation report, that employee, if you said that they are 90% risk, right? Over a period of time, in relation to everything else, you might fine-tune that information. But basically, you have to start with a number, and the risk number, the way we support it is between 0 and 100. Yeah.
Okay. Next one is for Adrian. Our current SIEM collects data very well, but it takes hours to access and drill down into the data or generate reports. Can a new SIEM complement an existing SIEM to address this?
Yeah, absolutely. We see it both with companies that have grown up with log management, adding a SIEM onto the existing infrastructure, as well as some of the legacy first-gen SIEM systems where you can actually export data or share data from the existing SIEM into a higher performance SIEM platform. So yeah, absolutely, and it's not uncommon either. There's several vendors that provide that capability.
Okay, great. And another one for you, Adrian. Another listener says, this seems to be a lot to swallow at once. Is there a path to build maturity? How soon do you think one can have this solution up?
Yeah, it is a lot too. We did a high-level document on this, and just in the high-level points that we're over 27 pages of description. I don't expect anybody to complete a migration process or an analysis process in under a month. You're almost, for some of the larger organizations we talk to, they're multinationals on several continents with 100 people who have stakeholder responsibilities. So this could take you a half of a year. So the process takes some time. Whoever is going to be leading the process, whoever is going to be assigned, really has to do some of these initial analysis steps for requirements and documentation early on to make this go smoothly, because everything in the later half of the process relates to the first part of the analysis.
Okay, quickly, we could take one more question for Adrian. Are dedicated headcount needed to operate and administer a SIEM?
Unfortunately, that happens. It shouldn't. The tool really should be making your job easier. That's really one of the critical points, is that it doesn't give me good alerts, therefore I'm looking through hundreds of false positives, or it's not giving me the report, so I'm having to tweak data, or I'm having to wait hours for the reports to get done. So that isn't one of the problems. You really don't want to have a full-time SOC if you can avoid it, because most people aren't in the SIEM business. They're responding to security and compliance requirements. So you really want to be able to offload these requirements and make it a very small piece of a couple of people, say, in compliance and audit and security and ops.
Great.
And just one small thing I'd like to add to that is, some of the customers are starting to see the benefit of the SIEM, and they're trying to bring in other stakeholders who can add, to improving the security of the organization into the mix. And I'm referring to the subject matter experts and the business owners who traditionally understand their applications much better than what the SOC probably would. So they are now another stakeholder who have a view into the SIEM, which is, consigned to what they need to see. And that really, once you bring all these stakeholders into the mix, that does increase the burden on some administrative burden on the folks who are going to create the right kind of reports and right kind of views and notifications for those business units. We have some large companies who have, over 50 business units that are relying on reports coming out of the SIEM for their specific applications. But we still have, like one or two people managing full-time. But these are the kind of things that will add, you'll have to plan for.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so we do have to wrap it up now. And just to let everyone know, if you did enter a question in and we did not get to answer it online, our speakers will follow up with you for the answer. And we did get a few inquiries about the slide deck, and it is available now at nitrosecurity.com/resources/webcasts. So thanks again to Adrian and Mel for giving terrific presentations and answering all of our questions. And thanks to everyone who attended this webcast. Have a great day.